There are moments in history when time seems to hold its breath, not because of war, not because of death, but because of decisions made not in human councils but in realms. No one can touch the deepest layers of cosmic memory. Their life was not formed from earth or bone, but from frequency. And it was there that a sacred silence was broken. In the earliest age, when humanity was still few, their existence echoed like an innocent song through forests, across rivers, into the long night. They lived, they breathed, and the universe listened. But then each footstep became heavier. Each prayer turned into a demand. The song became a scream. Sound multiplied, compressed, intensified, not a harmonious vibration anymore, but a violent noise that shattered order. In the heavens above, the stars began to tremble. Earth lost its primordial rhythm, and the gods, beings who had once gifted part of their own soul to humanity, began to withdraw, not out of anger, but sorrow. They could no longer hear the sacred call that humankind once knew. The noise had severed the connection between the human soul and the memory of the stars. A fracture opened not in stone, but in frequency, and from that fracture, a decision would rise, a decision powerful enough to drown the world in eternal silence. In the heavens, where light does not shine but spirals around a primordial consciousness, the gods did not walk. They resonated. The council was not summoned by voice, but by the shared reverberation of a common concern. The world is out of rhythm. Enlil stood at the center, his eyes like deep wells filled with ancient light that had begun to dim. He didn't need to raise his voice, for each of his thoughts distorted the very fabric of space around him. Humanity has forgotten me. Enlil uttered not with words, but through a transmission that transcended language. They no longer whisper to the universe. They scream into the void and call it prayer. Around him, the gods did not speak, but the layers of energy wrapped around their forms began to ripple, as if emotion was spreading beyond anyone's control. Ninhursag gazed down at the earth, where trees withered not from drought, but from no longer being sung to. Enki, god of the deep waters and memory, remained silent, but the light around him flickered, as if his heart had skipped a beat. The council required no vote. Consensus in the realm of the divine does not arise from majority, but from a shared, profound fatigue, a sacred sorrow that has no name. No one believed that humanity would realign itself. And so the decision was spoken without words. Purification, not by fire, for fire belongs to wrath, but by water, the only substance that can store memory, cleanse vibration, and restore silence. Water would not destroy, it would hush, drown the noise until no voice could rise to the heavens, and then a new world might begin, not from the heights but from the depths of listening. In that moment, the ME ancient vibrational tablets, the first frequencies encoded by the gods, emitted a long, low hum like a crack running through time. They felt the decision as a rupture in the structure of balance. Beings who lived through frequency trembled, not from the fear of death, but from the fear that memory might be washed away. Death is not feared by the universe, but forgetting that is unforgivable. As the light at the center of the council began to fold inward, a sign that the decision had been sealed. There was one vibration that refused to align. It was Enki. He did not object. He did not argue, but in his silence, something was still moving. A subtle tremor, quiet, so deep no one noticed, like a question unspoken, like a memory not yet recalled. He looked down, not at humanity, but at the deepest waters, where one final pulse still lived, still slept, within the form of a being who had not yet discovered what he would become. As the council dissolved, light melted into soft darkness. The gods returned to their realms, and the world began to prepare for the flood of silence. But in the midst of it all, a small wave radiated from the deepest place, not to reverse the decision but to send a dream. One last frequency implanted into the bloodstream of a human who would never hear Enki's voice, but would feel an unspoken urge prompting him to draw something never seen before. It would not be salvation. It would be a replica of cosmic memory hidden in the form of a vessel. And so the purification began. No one screamed, no one objected. For in the higher realms where decisions need no justification, a world had just been sentenced by the very sound it had created, and all that remained was frequency. A frequency waiting to be remembered. In a nameless land where night needs no darkness to be profound, Atra-hasis lay still as if he had merged with the very breath of the earth. He was not a king nor a prophet. No one remembered his name in stone carvings, no subjects, no temple. But what he possessed, no other, did an inner stillness untouched by the world's noise. And it was that stillness not opened by a key but by an ancient vibration that became the gateway through which a sacred dream could enter. As night fell like a soft veil over a bare soul, a subtle pulse moved through space, not touching his body, but flowing straight into his bloodstream like a forgotten melody, seeking the only one who still knew how to hum it. Atra-hasis did not awaken. But from that moment on, his sleep was no longer a place of rest. It became a hallway where layers of unnamed memory began to quietly open. There were no clear images, no words, only the sense that he was standing within a reality not found on any map. The ground beneath him trembled gently like it was breathing. Above him, the stars did not shine. They whispered in frequencies. And in that shapeless, colorless, timeless space, Atra-hasis felt something he had never known. Something sacred was reaching for him, not to speak but to be remembered. This dream was unlike any dream a human might have. It was not born of the subconscious but activated by the cosmos, a form of connection between human and God, between earth and water, between the unborn and the dying. Atra-hasis saw no face, but he saw a red light stretching across the horizon like blood flowing through the planet's veins. He saw the ME tablets, no longer solid stone, melting into sound, shattering into thousands of fragile frequencies. He saw temples swept away by water not breaking, but dissolving into waves like memories too full to carry. And from the center of it all, a vessel emerged, roofless, rudderless, not a ship of wood, but a spiritual form woven from that which humanity had forgotten how to see. In that dream, no one spoke. Yet Atra-hasis heard more clearly than anything he had ever heard in waking life. A wordless resonance rising from deep within, asking no permission, offering no persuasion, only existing as an undeniable truth. If no one keeps the memory, the water will wash away everything. Not just houses, but souls. Not just names, but the ability to remember why we ever existed at all. Atra-hasis tried to speak, but he had no mouth in that dream. Only thought and resonance. He reached toward the ME tablets, dissolving into waves, and from his fingertips, beams of light shot forth like veins of life, reconnecting each broken frequency. Beneath his hand, the vessel began to form, not from matter but from a concept reborn within the deepest well of collective memory. When he awoke, dawn had not yet broken, but the world was no longer the same. No one spoke to him. No one gave him orders. But he knew with a strange, undeniable certainty that from this day forward he must begin to build something that had never existed before. Not to save himself, but to save the final frequency left in the universe, the one still pulsing softly in his blood, like a song no one has yet dared to sing. In that dream, Atra-hasis did not know he was asleep. He did not know he was dreaming. Yet everything unfolded with a truth deeper than wakefulness. The sky above was no longer a serene blue dome, but cracked open like an ancient wound that had never healed. From those fractures, crimson light seeped as if the universe itself was bleeding. Beneath his feet, the earth did not split in fury, but melted in a nameless despair. And the water that rose was not ordinary water, but a surge of vibration carrying every frequency long forgotten. It did not drown. It swept away what had once been sacred temples, built of prayer songs that had once bridged gods and mankind. All familiar sound was erased, and in its place an ancient silence was restored. From within that darkness a shape began to emerge, not made of wood, not carved from stone, but composed of a substance without name, light woven from the original intention of the cosmos, a vessel. But not one built to move, one built to carry a frequency that had never died. It hovered neither above water nor upon land, and from deep within it, without sound, without words, a voice touched his spine, cold, deep, but not unfamiliar. Memory is drowning. Restore the first sound. Save a single rhythm that still lives. Atra-hasis did not respond, not because he couldn't, but because he knew. Words were not enough to answer something sacred. In that moment he felt his entire being was no longer a body but a channel, a conduit for a command, not from outside, but from within the memory of life itself. And as the light began to fade, as the ME dissolved into golden dust drifting weightlessly in the void, he awoke. No sweat, no labored breath, but a transformation had etched itself into his flesh, like a tattoo of light engraved in blood. He could not remember the dream clearly. No images, no words, but in his hand a strange shape had formed in the cracked, dry clay, as if his hands had molded it in his sleep. It followed no logic, no design, yet it pulsed with rhythm. Each curve obeyed an invisible law, as if sound itself had become form. He looked at it and did not understand, but his heart beat in time with it. And within that heartbeat a certainty took root, not from reason, not from analysis, but from the resonance of something inside him, trying to remember itself. He stepped outside. The sky was still dark, but the world was no longer the same. Not because it had changed, but because he no longer perceived it through the eyes of the guided, but through the intuition of one entrusted with an invisible map. A map leading back to the place where noise had never existed. He told no one. There was no need to, because he understood this was not a message for the masses, but for the last one still silent enough to act without needing proof. From that moment, atra-hasis began to build, not from a blueprint, but from unspoken memory. Each piece of wood he chose not for its size, but for how it felt in his hand. Each curve not for structural balance, but to echo a frequency long lost. Those around him saw a madman, but he was unmoved because he was not building to escape the flood. He was building a vessel of the first sound, a low note rising from the deep, reminding the universe memory has never died. It is only waiting for a hand that knows how to listen to be called back into existence. No one taught him. No hand guided him. No voice commanded him. Yet atra-hasis drew. He drew as if transcribing a memory not his own but belonging to a consciousness more ancient than any surviving myth. His fingers did not tremble, yet they were not moved by will they moved with a rhythm deep in the bone, as if the ground beneath his feet was breathing, whispering into the palms of his hands. Mud was no longer mere material. It became the primitive script of a language older than writing the language of frequency before form ever existed. From his blood mixed with the earth lines emerged, not a blueprint, not architecture, but a symphony of form, a structure unlike anything before, a vessel not made to sail the waves, but to resonate with the coming flood like a sacred instrument. The villagers looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Some mocked, "Do you think you're a god?" Others scoffed, "There's no prophecy about this." But Atra-hasis did not answer, because he knew what he was doing could not be defended with reason. It could only be justified by existence. Friends turned away. Hands that once tilled the soil with him no longer reached for his, yet he was not alone, because he walked with a memory, awakening, a memory never told in words, never written in books, but passed down through the deepest dreams within souls still silent enough to remember, and he was one of them, perhaps the only one. Each plank he touched had a different weight, not of mass, but of vibration. Some rang like the voice of a child unborn, others were deep like the mourning of Mother Earth. He chose not with eyes nor with hands, but through a resonance between body and the soul of matter. No one understood what he was doing, yet each piece placed seemed to restore a sacred frequency, a soundless code only those standing beyond the threshold of human memory could feel. Atra-hasis did not build to escape. He was not running from death. He did not pray to survive. Each part of the vessel was raised like a living ritual meant to carry a memory on the verge of extinction. Not personal memory, not history, but the archetypal memory of life itself. The very memory that once made gods bow to humanity, but which was now being drowned by noise and forgetting. When the sun rose, its light touched the vessel, not reflecting like it would off ordinary matter. Instead, the light dissolved into the structure, rippling outward like waves. Children stopped playing. Birds fell silent. No one could explain it, but in that moment the world knew something was reviving itself from the fracture between memory and the now, and Atra-hasis, still silent, stepped back and looked upon his creation. He was not proud, not content, just quiet because he knew. This was not the end, nor was it the beginning. It was the final anchor point, a frequency given form built not to save him, but to remind the cosmos. There is still one being listening. There is still one who carries the song that was never fully sung. No thunder, no warning. Only the sound stopped, as if the world had just held its breath for something that could not be named. No more wind through trees, no more flowing water, not even the familiar pulse of earth beneath the soles of one's feet. And then from somewhere far beyond the boundary of matter and emotion, a surge of water broke forth like the eternal cry of the earth itself. But it was not the scream of rage, it was the sob of loss. The flood rose not in a rush, not in violence, but like a sorrow, long held back, finally taking form. Temples, those structures that once stood as humanity's bold declaration before the cosmos collapsed without a sound. They did not fall because of the water, but because of the sheer weight of forgetting accumulated over generations. On their stone wall, sacred writings had faded. Symbols had lost their meaning. The enki tablets, crystalline vessels of living memory, began to fracture, not from force, but because there was no one left to receive what they carried. The songs, the only thing that could bridge the chasm between mankind and the gods, were choked off in the throats of those who never had the chance to sing, as if humanity's very voice had been withdrawn from reality, leaving behind a silence so loud it froze the soul. Atra-hasis stood there on the platform of the vessel. Not panicked, not afraid. He did not flee, did not call out to anyone. He simply watched as if he were not witnessing a disaster, but a ritual, and in that gaze he understood. This was not divine punishment, not the wrath of the heavens. This was a baptism of memory. The flood had not come to erase bodies. It came to purify vibration. It did not choose the good or the wicked, the worthy or the unworthy. It swept away all that no longer resonated with the heartbeat of the cosmos, and in that sweeping away there was no cruelty, only a sacred sorrow of an ancient intelligence forced to part with what was once most holy, dreams left unborn, prayers left unfinished. All returned to the void, not as death, but as a plea to be remembered rightly. Atra-hasis felt each drop of water on his skin like a note striking a nerve, not cold, but deep, as if the water were speaking not in language, but in memory. And in those moments he saw the dream again, not as images, but as feeling an unfinished song, a disrupted resonance and a tiny flicker of light, no bigger than a blink threading through the flood still struggling. Not to be extinguished. That was the light of intention, the light of a silent but unshakable decision that memory must be preserved, not in books, not in stories, but in action, in the form of the vessel he had built, in the silence he had embraced, in the way he stood still amid destruction without screaming. At that moment, the vessel was no longer a vehicle. It was a resonant fragment between a vanishing present and an unnamed future. And when the waters touched the foot of the vessel, atra-hasis closed his eyes, not to hide, but to listen more clearly than ever before, because amidst the shattering of civilization and the pulse of Mother Earth's soul, he knew. There was still one frequency not yet drowned, one heartbeat still alive, and if even one person could hear it, then everything could still be remembered. The vessel drifted silently, no oars, no sails, no direction marked by compass or chart. It moved as if summoned by an invisible breath, an ancient resonance still lingering among the layered vibrations of the cosmos. No one saw the force that moved it. No one understood its laws. Yet the vessel glided across the dying waters as if it had long been awaited to complete a journey no one could remember well enough to describe. Atra-hasis stood upon it, his figure small beneath the vast sky, unshaken, uttering no names, offering no plea for protection. He simply looked not outward, but into the stillness opening within himself. There were no tears, but his gaze was so heavy that even the heavens turned away. For in that gaze there was no accusation, no surrender, only a single message, silent yet absolute. I did not survive to go on living. I live, so no one has to repeat this again. No one gave him those words. They did not come from thought. They came from the wound still bleeding in humanity's memory, a wound born not of war, but of forgetting. Atra-hasis understood if he were gone there would be no one left to remember, no one left to speak, and if no one spoke, then everything from myth to truth would dissolve into silence. Beneath the vessel, as the water thickened like a sea of shattered memory, a mead tablet began to glow, not like a torch, not in blinding flashes of lightning, but with a faint trembling shimmer like the heartbeat of an unborn child. Yet the light did not go out. Though dim, though flickering, it still lived. It was the frequency of an unnamed memory, a being never recorded yet still sending waves through each layer of water, through each fold of space. The vessel carried no riches, no texts, no heirlooms of a lost civilization. It carried only one singular capacity to remember not through writing but through living structure, not through logic but through resonance. And atra-hasis, with the same hands that had placed each plank in rhythm, had now become the bearer of the final frequency, still intact in a world dissolving into mirage. Each wave struck the whole like fate knocking, not in threat but in question. Do you truly carry what must be kept? And in every resonant reply of the vessel, there was an answer. Yes, but not for myself, I carry it, to pass on. In that moment, atra-hasis understood so deeply he could not give it form, in words that the world would not be saved by force, not by miracle, but by a persistent memory refusing to die. No one might understand him. History might not record his name in golden letters. But as long as one frequency he bore, remained then one day in another place within another dream, someone would hear it, would awaken, and would begin again the symphony that had never been finished. And for that, he needed no more words, no reasons, no recognition. He only needed to stand in resonance, allowing the ancient frequency to find new form in the age to come. Because he knew, as the stars once knew, it is not light but memory. That is the last thing capable of surviving any flood. In the heart of the ocean, where light does not reach, where time no longer flows in a straight line, a me tablet still turns, slowly, like the fragile heartbeat of a being that has witnessed too much to still believe in continuity. It does not spin because of any mechanism, but because of an intention left unfulfilled. Each rotation is a whisper unspoken, yet echoing across all layers of existence like a rhythm awaiting something. Within it is not information, not data, but the first song, the primordial sound that once awakened the elements, once broke open into life, once linked heaven and earth with a frequency no one dares to sing any more. But even in this profound silence, the song has not ended. It does not require a singer. It only needs to be felt. And that is what makes the ME tablet indestructible. It does not depend on civilizations, languages, or symbols. It is not washed away by water nor broken by forgetting. It only waits like a signal sent before time began, still drifting through the ocean of consciousness, seeking a soul quiet enough to remember one day, not according to history, nor to any cycle, a dream will come. Not vivid, not radiant, but merely a vague feeling. A sound. Only one person can hear an image. No one else understands. A longing tied to no specific memory. That will be the moment the ME tablet reaches a human being, not through physical contact, but through the subtle resonance between soul and the last surviving frequency from when the cosmos was still young. That person may live in a modern city surrounded by artificial lights and cold concrete walls. But one night in a nameless sleep, they will awaken not from noise but from a silence too real, too deep, too alive. And in that silence, the ME will begin to hum, not as music, but as a movement in the blood, a strange rhythm in the heart. Something inside them will stir, will break open, will feel. I once knew this, but no one ever taught me that frequency does not destroy because it is not a tool. It is the continuation of sacred memory of the original essence of life. It once existed in stone, in water, in trees, in the first heartbeat of the first human, and now it drifts beneath the ocean, not as a relic, but as a seed awaiting the right moment to sprout once more within the human soul. Not to recall the past, but to reactivate what was never truly lost, only forgotten. Because the truth is, nothing is ever truly lost in the universe. Only signals drifting in silence, waiting for the right frequency to touch consciousness again. The ME tablet does not need to be discovered. It only needs to be heard by a place deeper than the mind, where memory and soul are one. And when that happens, when someone begins to remember what they were never taught, then rebirth will not begin with a new era, but with a rhythm. Slow, gentle. A whisper, not from out there, but from within the bloodstream. In that moment, the ME will stop spinning, not from exhaustion, but because it has fulfilled its purpose. And within the heart of the one who was chosen, a melody will rise, and for the first time in thousands of years, the first sound will be sung again. But this time by humankind itself. Or if you've ever seen red light in your sleep, heard a call that made no sound, then perhaps you still carry a fragment of the ancient ME, not as an object, but as a frequency hidden between heartbeats, breathing with the wind, vibrating whenever you touch something the mind cannot name. A memory that never truly vanished, only buried beneath the noise of the modern world. We don't tell this story to convince you. We tell it so that you might begin to listen to yourself again, to listen not with your ears, not through words, but through the faint resonance inside your soul. Because if you've ever dreamed of a directionless vessel, a sky fractured like a wound, or a language you never learned but somehow understood, then maybe you're not just a listener. Maybe you are the one being called. That fragment of the ME doesn't require a ritual to activate. It only needs a moment of true silence, a single second when you pause in the middle of your endless thoughts and feel deep within that you've always known more than you were ever taught. When that moment comes, you're no longer just a viewer. You are part of the journey, a living witness to a memory that is returning. And if you are beginning to wake up, not from sleep, but from a forgetting that has lasted thousands of years, leave a message. Not for us, but for yourself. A sign that the frequency has been heard. And don't forget. Episode 10. The Memory That Survived. Because perhaps that piece of memory is still waiting for you to name it.